Okay, let's take a look at solving problems on cubes. Now, how do we deal with problems on cubes? So there are different types of questions asked on cubes. Basically, at times there are cuboids also. So we'll handle them as we deal with various questions. It doesn't make sense in discussing concepts at this point in time on cubes and then trying to solve those questions. So fundamentally, I hope everyone understands this is a cube. Now, if I pick up a cube, so you know this is the face of the cube like this. How many faces are there? So there's a face here, there's a face behind that. So similarly, there's a face here, there's a behind that, and there is on the top, and there's bottom there. So totally there are 6 faces, right? So we learn about these 6 faces, and you have these edges there, right? So we have corners there. So we can deal with these things as we deal with questions. For now, let's directly get on to solving problems. So here is a typical type of question that comes in. They're asking you to find out the maximum number of identical pieces a cube can be cut into by 9 cuts. So if there are 9 cuts, how many are possible? So now how do we deal with these kind of questions? So if you want to deal with these kind of questions, it's, instead of directly going for 9 cuts, it's better we understand what happens if there is 1 cut or a 2 cut or a 3 cut. As I taught you in puzzles also, it's very important to deal with very basic questions before we get on solving big numbers. So just imagine if there is 1 cut. Now, here is a cube. So you can see there is a cube here. So this is the front face. Okay. So you have the top here and you have the side face here, right? So basically, now if there is 1 cut, what do you mean by 1 cut? So if I cut it like this, if I cut this cube like that, right? So basically, if I cut it from the middle, don't you think there will be 2 identical pieces that can be formed? Yes, there are 2 identical pieces that can be formed there. Now, the same thing, if I cut it from this face, even if I cut it from this face like that, from the middle, it will give 2 identical pieces. Yes or no? Yes. Now, if I cut it in another direction, let me call that as this direction. In this direction also, if I were to cut it, so if I were to cut this like that, now cut in the sense you understand I'm cutting this into 2 equal parts. So once again you will have 2 parts. So using 1 cut, whether you cut it horizontally or whether you cut it vertically like this, in whichever way you cut it, it will give into 2 identical pieces. Okay, let's see what happens if we do 2 cuts. Okay, if we have 2 cuts, what happens? Let's take a look. Let me take another cube. Now when I have 2 cuts, just imagine I cut this 2 cuts horizontally like this. Horizontally like this. If I cut it horizontally like this, this will divide into 3 equal or 3 identical pieces. 2 cuts, if I do identically like this will give me 3 identical pieces. Yes or no? I can clearly see if I cut it this way, 3 identical pieces. Let's see another situation using 2 cuts. Let us see another situation. So instead of cutting 3 identical pieces like this, so 2 cuts. With these 2 cuts, here I have done 2 cuts horizontally. Now here instead of doing that way, let me do 1 cut horizontally like this in one direction. So let me assume this as one direction, right? Now I'm saying when I say one direction, I'm cutting on one face. So now imagine I'm cutting this face. Now if I cut like this, so that means basically it's getting cut like that, right? Yes or no? So when I cut horizontally, I'm dividing this into 2 pieces like that. So, if you want to imagine, it will look something like this. It will look something like this. And you will have a similar piece in the bottom, right? Yes or no? You'll have a similar piece. one up and one down. So basically, I've divided as it is sitting here. Say, let's assume this is the base. So I'm cutting it like this. This divides into two parts. Yes or no? So that'll also look something like that. Yeah. I hope you're good. So basically, I'm saying if I cut it this way, there are two parts. Now if I'm using the second cut in a different direction. One direction was this. Now I'm cutting it in a different direction. If I cut it this way, I'll have one piece this side and one piece this side. So basically, I'm cutting now like this, right? If I'm cutting it like this, so basically it divides into another two pieces. So in one direction, it is giving me, if I'm doing one cut in one direction, it gives me two pieces. In another direction, if I cut it, it gives me two pieces. Overall, if I look at, the number of pieces will be 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I'm cutting it into one cut is giving me two pieces and the second cut in a different direction is giving me two pieces. So basically, you get 2 into 2, you get 4 pieces. I hope you're getting it. So even if I do in a different way, when I say I do it in a different way, let me do it in a different way now. Here, if I cut in this direction, okay, if I cut it in this direction, it gives me two pieces. Now, if I cut it in a different direction, that means in this direction, using this space, if I divide, it will also, there will be two pieces. This is one piece and this is one piece. So basically, this direction give me one cut will give me two pieces and this direction one cut will give me two pieces. Basically 2 into 2, once again it is 4 pieces. So using two cuts, here you got 3 identical pieces when I did all the 2 cuts in one direction. But when I did it in 2 different directions, in this direction it gave me 2 pieces and this direction it gave me 2 pieces. So totally 2 into 2, I got 4 pieces. So in short, in using two cuts, what we understood is if 2 cuts are in the same direction, I got 3 pieces, 3 identical pieces. Whereas the same 2, if I cut it in 2 different directions, so in one direction it gave me 2 pieces, in another direction it gave me 2 pieces, 2 into 2 it gave me 4 pieces. So what did you learn from this? What I learned from this is when I cut it in 2 different directions, the number of pieces I'll get is more. So we'll understand this with one more example, then we can derive the understanding of how on solving these problems.